Okay, and I believe we're live. And I always thank God when we go live because it's just an astonishing feat in itself. Brothers and sisters, much delay. Welcome back to Casual Catholic Conversations. It's a pleasure to be on your screens here tonight. We have such a wonderful guest in Father Robert Krishna. It's going to be a fantastic chat. Before we get to Father Robert, we do have a shout out. So, Alters, if I could please trouble you, sir.
Massive shout out to to Catholic Apparel. I was almost gonna shout out ourselves. So massive shout out to Catholic Apparel. Wonderful fashion line. Beautiful way to evangelize while you're on the street. Beautiful apparel like this beautiful jumper of Our Lady of Guadalupe. They have other jumpers as well and shirts like Stefan's wearing. So give them a like on Instagram and follow their stuff and go buy something.
Please and thank you. That'd be great. Thank you very much, brother. That is catholicapparel.com.au. I'll make sure I add the link to the description of this video. In saying that, with the formalities out of the way, we can now greet our very wonderful guest, Father Robert Krishna. Father, it's a pleasure to have you on tonight.
Oh, pleasure to be here.
Father, you have a very interesting life's journey. I remember when I was announcing it actually at our parish, I used the title from one of the articles in the Catholic Weekly, which pretty much describes word by word your journey so far, and everyone's like, wow, that's quite a long journey. So, Father, I thought we would start off with that. I want to understand your life's journey. So, step by step, can I ask you, because in the article, and please correct it if it's wrong, it says that you pretty much established yourself as an atheist at the age of 10.
Yep.
At such a young age, what made you make that call?
It actually sounds quite silly, but I lost an argument with my mother over this, and so I thought the sensible thing if you lose an argument and somebody else wins is that they're right. Nowadays, I'm much more likely to say if I lose an argument, the reason is probably because I'm not all that right. And, so at the age of 10, I didn't have the mental resources to say, maybe they just have better arguments because they're bigger or have read more or whatever else. And it's quite possible that I'm right, but I just don't have the right arguments. But no, that's so. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So yeah, that's how I became an atheist. So
amazing.
It's not profound.
Yeah, it's funny because you read all the stories of the famous atheists, and they became atheists because they thought of this, or there was suffering, or they came down to these logical conclusions, and you essentially summed it up with you lost an argument.
Yeah, I suppose part of the argument was that you couldn't explain how the world came to be and so on. But it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't mind-numbingly intellectual stuff. It was just I lost an argument.
The reason why I bring it up, Father, is because more and more these days you have young people who don't affiliate themselves with religion. They call them the nuns here in Australia, but I guess the technical term is atheism. And a lot of them...
It could be agnosticism.
Absolutely, and we're going to be getting to that in a second, because that's the next step in your journey. But I found it amazing because usually a lot of time with these atheists, it's usually when they're a bit older, they've read some philosopher, they've probably read, I don't know, maybe Hume, or I can't really name any of the other famous philosophers at the current moment, but you know what I mean, they've read these famous philosophers and they've come down to these supposedly rational conclusions. And it's funny how, and I always say this as well, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to people who do eventually become atheists, there are those personal stories behind it, mainly driving that, those personal scars, if you will. And yeah, that's why I was quite astonished when you said at 10 years old you became an atheist. Now, would you say you were actually an atheist, or was that something that you were kind of just doing because,
It's so far as I can remember, I think I think I went through very superstitious moments,
Mm.
and probably, kind of once or twice, I went through the motions of praying or whatever else, but so far as I can remember, I was,
Yeah.
like, okay, this is the truth, and so here I am. Yeah.
No problem at all. Before I move on to agnosticism, Otos, do you have anything that you want to ask, Father?
Not at this stage.
Not at this stage. No problem.
You've covered it. You've covered it well.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're probably going to move on to the pretty big stuff. So, as we go along in this article and kind of your life's journey, you come over to Australia and you start your degree. And correct me if I'm wrong, you were doing a science degree and the major was in physics.
Yes.
Okay. And it was around that time where you actually said that not only was mathematics not your forte, and I can almost guarantee you 90% of our audience right now probably relates to that fact, so don't worry too much about that. But it was around that time you even mentioned that you started looking at the philosophical side of things, and it actually started to depress you.
No. That's not quite right.
Yeah, no problem. Clarify for me.
So the depression came before.
Okay.
And basically, I went through a period of depression. I had clinical depression. I took medication for it. But a bunch of things were happening in my life, and part of it also was simply that I had this idea of what my future was going to be, and I was kind of discovering that my skills were not quite up to it.
Yes.
So so that was part of it, and I went through a stage of, so connected to that depression, I went through a stage of trying to rationalize, why, what makes life worth living, and and I really couldn't find an answer. And it really does seem that what we call good or evil, or what we call beautiful or ugly, all of these things are I'm not saying atheists can't have this. I'm just saying that at root it seemed to be to not have any foundation. So then I thought, well, the only way this makes sense is if there is something outside. So nothing within the universe explains this. There must be something outside, something beyond, which explains why this is not just, I approve of this, but it actually is true, that that I don't know that cruelty is bad, or that Mother Teresa was a good person and Hitler was a horrible person. This is not just saying I approve of Mother Teresa and I disapprove of Hitler. It's saying something much more substantial and true. And so then that led me to well, look, if that's true, then that makes life worthwhile. And then the question became, what kind of God and which God, and so
That's your next step in the journey,
yeah.
from agnosticism to eventually Christianity, in particular when it comes to the Anglicans. Is there a reason why you picked the Anglican Church?
Um, I mean, I was I read a lot as a child.
Mm.
I read a lot of English literature. So from that, Anglicanism seemed very familiar.
Mm.
And yeah, but basically, my thought was, look, Christ really existed,
Mm.
and if Christ really existed, that gives Christianity one argument over Hinduism.
Mm.
So that was basically why I chose Christianity. Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been told this, Father, but your story is very similar to the story or the conversion tale of C.S. Lewis. And he's eventually... you laugh, I'm not too sure if anyone has made that comparison, but it's funny how C.S. Lewis, when he essentially, like you, came down to the conclusion that there must be some sort of God. I don't think he did it in terms of the value, but he did it more in terms of... He described it almost like this inner desire, this tug of war. He couldn't beat it. But essentially, one of his mates, when he was contemplating which religion to join again, he was contemplating between Hinduism and Christianity, which is funny because it's almost the reverse of you. And he didn't like Christianity at first because he thought it was too pagan-like. And one of his friends simply said, Christ is indeed a historical figure. The words I think he uses is, we have literal footsteps of Christ. So that's definitely a big differentiation when it comes to Christianity. So you're in agnosticism, then
Sorry?
you've become agnostic. You've become Anglican. My apologies for that. You become an Anglican. You're baptized within the Anglican Church, and then all of a sudden you meet some Catholics. Now, were they having a casual conversation like we're having now?
Well, actually, I mean, I met some Catholics because I became interested in a Catholic poet, James Macaulay, and I kind of tried to do something to promote him a little bit, and so then I came into contact with the Catholics. So that's how I came into contact with Catholics. I started hanging around with them, and then I started getting into arguments with them. And yeah, so that was what happened.
So in relation to that, Father, in relation towards the arguments, I know from listening to many conversion stories from non-Catholics to Catholicism, what was the kind of the barrier that stopped you from crossing towards Catholicism, or what stopped you from becoming a Catholic when you were an Anglican, and what did you have to overcome?
Great question, Antos.
A couple of things. One, the sort of Anglican I was, I thought I was Catholic.
Okay.
In the broader sense of the word. The second thing was that, I mean, I just thought Catholics were out of date. I mean, I really did, and it's not an uncommon view that identifies the Reformation with progress and the modern world, and then
most definitely, yeah. I remember watching a video, and I might be wrong in this, but I think Dr. Taylor Marshall was an Anglican priest beforehand, and he actually was praying the Rosary. He wore a scapular, so he had many Catholic devotions, but he didn't cross that border for a while.
It's and I just find it incredibly relatable how you said you found Catholicism to be outdated, because you're right, Father. That's probably the one of the most common remarks when it comes to anybody having a chat to us about any of the big time political issues, if you will. It's all about the Catholic Church just needs to get with the times. The Catholic Church just needs to update itself.
Yeah, I don't even know that I had that much thought. It's not like I looked at the church's teaching at this or that and thought Catholics think wrong. I just thought at the time. I mean, I'm a historian, so this is by training, and this is kind of embarrassing to admit in a way, but I just thought Catholics were passé, basically. Like, if you were intelligent, you wouldn't be Catholic. I mean, I suppose, yeah. Which was, yeah. I mean, anyway, I subsequently, actually, I realized this later on when I'd become a Catholic. In fact, when I was actually studying as a Dominican for the priesthood, I came across people who moved in my sort of circles. This was in the North Shore, but and they had not dissimilar views, and that's an interesting thing that as a culture loses its Christianity, there is a negative side to that, because you're talking about genuine people, people who've lost something essential, which could help them, which draws them to God and enables them to live a flourishing life. But on the other hand, there's also a kind of opportunity there. Because at some stage you hit this barrier where people are just able to approach it and then see, and that's something that could even be an opportunity in a way, because I mean, the places in the world where Catholicism is growing, and Christianity in general is growing particularly rapidly, are China and Hong Kong, and to some extent Singapore, places which are not traditionally Christian. And I mean, there's been some Christian presence, obviously, but the whole culture is quite alien. And so people are able to just discover Christianity, as opposed to people having to overcome deep-seated prejudices about what the church teaches, or deep hurts from a variety of things, all sorts of things. So yeah, it's one of those interesting things. Yeah,
absolutely. It's quite amazing. I think in the article, if I can use an exact quote, you said I was converted through their examples and conversations rather than through their arguments.
Yeah.
And I quite love that because, and I've been saying this over the last a couple of months or so, and I've particularly found this, especially during the height of the pandemic, that we're so quick to almost get into this defensive apologetic mode that we tend to undermine how powerful just being a witness to the Catholic faith is, and just being that truth Catholic.
Yes, and very very often, sometimes people who come with profound hurts, profound difficulties, whatever, profound struggles, whatever. Sometimes even arguments can be counterproductive in some ways, because they're hearing you think them wrong, you think they're wrong, whereas they need to hear first that they're loved by God, that you are interested in them, that you want to be their friend, and then that gives them an opportunity to observe you at work and what makes you tick, and that then puts the ball in their court in some way. And that's an interesting thing. The same thing happens it happened in quite a lot of situations where sometimes if you insist on making the first move on something, that can be less productive than if you let somebody else make their own conclusions.
Yes, definitely.
It's like
I think something I struggled with early on, and Stefan can be a witness to that, especially when discussing with non-Catholics, when trying to get my point across, is forgetting to listen to their point. And that was something that I actually had to step back and realize through the guidance of Stefan, obviously telling me, like when we were speaking to one, he goes, "Did you ever listen to him?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "You did not." So I think that conversation where you allow the other subject to speak as well kind of has a more powerful influence than we realize.
We're all guilty of that at times. We are definitely all guilty of that.
I mean, myself too. But yes.
So, Father, can I want to get your thoughts on this one line, because you said that there was one line that Dr. Robert Haddad used, and we're all very familiar with Robert Haddad, and we all love his work. He said, "You're never going to get all the answers to your objections, and at some stage, you need to make a leap of faith." And the reason why I just wanted to bring that up and just get your thoughts on it is because, especially early on when I was coming into the faith, I was convinced that everybody who became Catholic did it for rational purposes. They did it because they were just convinced that that's it. This is the way that I have to go, and they've deduced everything. But I'm not implicating that you didn't do it in rational ways, Father. But all I'm saying is it's interesting how you said eventually you just had to hack the fact that you're not going to get all the answers to your questions, and you made that leap of faith. And here you are now in the Catholics. I'm going to ask you how you got to the Dominicans, but I want you to expand just a bit more on that, because people are going to be.
I think we sometimes have this kind of ideal of reasoning in our head, which never really which is not the way in which we operate anywhere else. We don't in our day-to-day life, we make choices which are not perfectly rational, and which are not wrong choices because they're not perfectly rational. And we don't wait for every one of our questions to be answered, or every one of our hesitations to be answered before we make them. So that's just about to say about being rational and the issue of, reason is a very important thing, but it's not everything. We're not built like that. But the others and the other side of it is that sometimes things make more sense viewed from within.
Absolutely.
Than they do from without. And I think a lot of Catholics, a lot of Christians have had that experience. I was quite interested I followed there was a prominent atheist who she used to run a blog, and one day she announced that she was becoming Catholic. And she's almost certainly a much more systematic thinker than I am. And quite a lot of her conversion was rational, but I did notice that, and I know that several things, ways in which, that kind of things that fell into place later on as after she converted. And it was just a natural process. And then I thought, okay, it's not just me, it's people who are much more systematic thinkers than I am. Anyway, so yeah. So it's not that reason is bad. It's just that you're never going to get every answer to every question, because you can always find a reason, to doubt further and then further and then further.
I have a point that I want to kind of build on. I don't know if you have anything you want to talk about first, because I don't want to be dominating the conversation. There was when you said you are convinced from within the faith, and this is where I want to take on the next point, because you said that around the time of your conversion, or I believe just before you converted to Catholicism, or as you converted to Catholic, you had a devotion to St. Augustine, and his own conversion story actually inspired you quite a bit. And when you mentioned the whole, sometimes you're convinced more from within, so from within the faith. Remember the time when Augustine was trying to contemplate the Holy Trinity from outside of it? He tried to use logic and reasoning, and then he had to have that little child who eventually had to tell him, I'll be able to pour all the waters of the oceans into this hole before you ever fathom the Holy Trinity.
That vision, right?
Yeah, a vision, or convinced traditional-wise, it was actually a story that did, or it was experience that did occur with St. Augustine. With St. Augustine's conversion story, Father, and I always recommend to people, read his Confessions, because by far it's got to be one of the greatest written texts in all of human history. It's definitely up there. But what in particular about St. Augustine's story really inspired you?
I think my actual discovery of Augustine was round about the, after I became Catholic, or when I started studying Catholic things. Augustine. So, I mean, the Confessions are a story of a group of friends coming to God. It's not just about Augustine. So people often describe it as an autobiography. It's not. It's really what it is a conversation between himself and God.
Absolutely.
And you are kind of eavesdropping on this conversation between himself and God.
Absolutely.
And from time to time, he turns around and somehow he actually, from time to time, he talks to God about you. And from time to time, he says things about people who might be reading him and why he is doing this for people who might be reading him. But it's really a conversation with God. So that kind of idea of I'm a very conversational person. And so that kind of being like it's a very attractive picture. Him talking to God and him wondering. And in many ways it's a love story. It's you know it's like a man asking, saying to his beloved, "Where were you all my life?" And so there's that aspect of it. There's the aspect of him wandering and being, being grasped by a variety of things and eventually being grasped by God.
Yeah.
It's the story of several friendships that he has and what role human friendships play in our relationship with God, and what role our relationship with God plays in our human friendships. So, just after Augustine's own conversion. So Augustine's own conversion occurs closely with the conversion of Alypius. In some ways, there is also, in its own little way, a conversion story of Monica. Monica actually grows over the course of the confessions, and she's actually a much more substantial character than like popular piety often paints her as just a devout mother who was praying for Augustine's conversion. But she grows in a variety of different ways. Anyway, so all of this was very attractive to me. And I actually, I studied him professionally as part of my honours thesis. So I read his work on grace.
Beautiful work. Oh, amazing work, St. Augustine and grace. And look, we could talk for hours on St. Augustine because no doubt he's just touched the lives of so many people. And he's just such a phenomenal saint. I thought I would, only because I'm just wary of time here now. You have such a remarkable story, so I want to try and cover as much as we possibly can. It then writes that you were introduced to the Dominicans, and because one of your friends thought that you'd be a good Dominican, even before you converted to Catholicism.
That's true.
So why Dominicans? What made him look at you and say you should be a Dominican?
Well, he, part of it was that he was interested in the Dominicans, and part of it was that I asked very weird questions. I think that's basically it. And yes, and so it's a combination of the two. He thought I'd fit in with the kind of the weird intellectual culture of the Dominicans, and he was right, like I do. But then my becoming a Dominican had a lot to do with meeting Dominicans and really. They showed an interest in me. There were, quite a lot of them, quite a lot of Dominicans, not just Father Don Murphy, but people who a lot of Sydney Catholics of your generation might not know, but my generation did, like people like Father Joseph Enoch or Father Bob Mutlow. So I hung out with them, and I liked the way they prayed. So I encountered the Divine Office through the Dominicans, and they used to have there was a thing called Frassati Circle, where we used to meet, have a meal, and discuss the theological topic of the day, whatever it was.
Is that named after Blessed Giorgio Frassati?
Yeah, Pier Giorgio Frassati. So it was yeah.
Father, if I can tell you the amount of times me and Stefan have discussed those so-called weird questions till 3 a.m. in the morning, not only between each other, but we're from the parish. We go to the parish, Our Lady of Lebanon, in Harris Park in Sydney, and sometimes we'll just be sitting there, and someone random, we won't even know this person, will come up and just ask us this most random question, and we'll sit there till like 2-3 in the morning and just discussing it, and the person probably had already gone and satisfied with the answer or the discussion we've had. But I think those so-called weird questions are beautiful, and they bear so many fruits.
Oh, they're good fun. They are really good fun. I've always loved those weird and wacky conversations. One of them that comes to mind that we've had countless of conversations about is free will. We just love this idea of free will and divine providence and divine foreknowledge. It's just an astonishing topic, and you can spend hours just talking about it. And Father, if I may say, and when I was reading your story and learning that you became part of the Dominicans, I can wholeheartedly relate to the fact that yes, the Dominicans are. You think of them as these, and I mean, like, it's not an offense or anything, but when you think about a Dominican, you almost instantaneously think about Thomas Aquinas, St. Thomas Aquinas. You almost go almost towards that. But a lot of the videos that I've watched of Dominicans, they just seem like average blokes, like everyday blokes. They just love to have a chat about things. And which is quite astonishing, which is exactly the kind of vibe that you're giving off right now. It just seems like you love to have a chat.
I do, yes.
Most definitely.
All right, so you've joined the Dominicans now. You've taken on the name Robert, and that was because of a Pride Dominican that obviously had some part to play there. And now, yeah. And how long have you been a Dominican priest now for, Father?
I was ordained in 2017, so 4 years.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Wow. And what a beautiful journey it is. And like I said, just reading the title in itself just intrigued me enough just to ask you all these questions.
I didn't write the title. I wouldn't have written that title. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we can think about different titles some other time, but it's a really good title to grasp people into your story and to help you understand your life. So if you were to summarize it, you would summarize it like that without a shadow of a doubt. So with that, Father, thank you very much we've spent around, I think, 40 minutes just discussing your journey, which is great.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, we kind of want to get into also discussing the Rosary, considering it's the month of the Rosary as well. And I know that the Dominicans have a devotion, quite a large devotion towards the Rosary. And I know full well Altez has got a whole bunch of things to talk about and to ask you. So Altez, I'm just going to let you take it away, bro.
Yeah, so, Father, what... In relation to the Rosary, there's many rosaries that are prayed now. We've got the Seven Sorrows Rosary, we've got the Franciscan Corona Rosary, and we've got the Rosary, which is known as the Dominican Rosary.
The Rosary.
Yeah. Well, when you say Rosary, you only think of one. But I remember I was talking to a friend, and I mentioned the Corona Rosary, and she's like, "Oh, did they invent that because of Corona?" I'm like, "No." It's been there since...
Corona means crown, and the virus is called Corona because it looks like a crown. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Could you just give us a bit of insight in the history of the Rosary? Because in my opinion, there's no better person to ask than a Dominican priest about the Dominican Rosary.
As you probably realized, the practice of praying on beads is extremely old. It goes back to the first millennium and the Jesus prayer.
Yep.
That we your hands need something to do when you are praying, and we have this fondness for counting things, so we count. And within the Dominican history, the records that we have, the earliest record of somebody who prayed something like the Rosary is an early friar who asked to be buried, who was buried with a rope on which he used to say Our Fathers and Hail Marys.
Interesting.
Because the Hail Mary was a fairly older prayer. It's not a recent prayer, but I believe it was broken up. So it was only the angelic salutation and the Elizabeth salutation, and then the second part came around the 16th century.
Yeah. So
interesting.
There's a medieval, a late medieval piece by a composer called Josquin, who sets the Hail Mary, Ave Maria, to prayer, and his Ave Maria doesn't end with what we now recognize as the full Hail Mary. There were a variety of conclusions to the Hail Mary.
Yeah,
and the version that we have now was settled in the 16th century.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was during the time of the Black Plague where they needed an intercessor, and they used our Mother Mary for the intercession. That's why it says, "Pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death," because the Black Plague was what we have now, the coronavirus.
It could be, but Josquin's Ave Maria is after this, so it still doesn't have a settled form. In fact, the Rosary wasn't added to the Dominican habit, until very, very late. Certain provinces used to wear the Rosary as a necklace around here. You can't see me around here like that. And the practice seems to have grown from then of meditating on the life of Christ with these Hail Marys, with the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be. So,
go, Father. Sorry.
So, and then around about the 14th century, just like speaking as a historian, around about the 14th century, there's the claim that Saint Dominic received a revelation where he was given the Rosary. The record, the earlier historical record doesn't, which is quite extensive, doesn't say that. So I'm a little bit, putting my historian's hat on, I would say, something was given, whatever was given, wasn't kind of handed on in the same way, because we do have quite extensive records of the Virgin Mary appearing to St. Dominic, to various of the early friars and so on and so forth, and giving them, for instance, the habit. And the other very famous story of the brethren took up saying the Salve Regina to deal with sickness, and then they started saying it at Compline, and then there's a vision of there's a vision of the Blessed Virgin Mary kneeling before God. Or there are a few, but this one doesn't occur, interestingly enough. I'm open either way on that issue.
I've read Saint not yet, hopefully one day, but Father Donald Calloway's book, Champions of the Rosary. I'm not sure if you've read it, Father, but it says in there that our Blessed Mother appeared to Saint Dominic in the 13th century to preach his Psalter, to preach her Psalter, and gave him the mysteries to combat. As you said, because it's about the life, the mysteries reflect the life of Jesus, and the Albigensian heresy was actually attacking those mysteries that Mary gave him. But the
reality of the life of Christ. Yeah, I mean, as I said, it could have been the case, but if so, the historical record doesn't record it until much later.
Most definitely it is, and it's surprising that Father Donald Calloway mentions that there is actually no writings from Saint Dominic himself in relation towards that that vision.
And more importantly, there's no writings by other people about it, because there was an attempt to record various things about St. Dominic. And it was never quite as extensive. So St. Dominic himself didn't write, so at least we don't have much of his own writing. We have two letters.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the vision of Our Lady of Las Lajas, Father?
No.
It's a apparition that happened in Colombia, and it's our Blessed Mother carrying baby Jesus in her arms. There's a whole story that led up to that, but in short terms, she appeared on a wall, similar to Our Lady of Guadalupe, where they didn't know where it appeared from, and she's holding a rosary and giving it to Saint Dominic, and then you got baby Jesus holding a friar's cord, giving it to Saint Francis. So.
Yes, I mean that's an interesting historical battle, because there was this 15th century debate between Franciscans and Dominicans as to who originated the Rosary. So I mean, without being somehow skeptical about anything and everything, there are some quite fun little historical things. But anyway, so what I was going to say about St. Dominic, we have a document called the 9 Ways of Prayer of St. Dominic. And there are a description of all these things that St. Dominic used to do to pray, but the Rosary isn't one of them. It's just interesting. But as I said, there is a very early record from one of the Dominican friars who was buried with this rope on which he used to say Pater Aves. Whether specifically that refers to the Rosary itself or a Rosary-like devotion, I don't know. And then later on, it is added. And it takes the shape of something that mimics the office, the divine office. So 150 Psalms, 150 decades of the Rosary for each Psalm. And yeah. And then sometime in the 19th century, the Rosary is actually added formally to the Dominican habit, as something that you wear, and
This may be a bit off topic. Is there still beef between the Dominicans and the Franciscans to this day?
What sort of you mean on the Rosary?
Let's just keep it,
yeah.
I mean, no, I know what beef means, but in this context. But I was wondering, not on the Rosary. There are a whole variety of things on which Franciscans and Dominicans disagree and take different routes. We had a lot in common in the early days, actually. You know, the Franciscans got to Oxford before we did, before the Dominicans did. The Franciscans had a very strong intellectual culture.
Absolutely.
We were both founded as preaching orders. And in the 50s, when in the 1250s, I should be clear. I don't mean in the 1950s. But in the 1250s. And into the 60s, you had when the Dominicans and the Franciscans were both attacked by a secular clergy, diocesan clergy. There was this moment where Dominicans and Franciscans were issuing letters, like the masters of both orders, or the Minister General of the Franciscans and the Master of the Dominicans were issuing joint letters, joint encyclicals under both their names. So we had a lot in common. And then you find after about 1270s, we kind of go in some very different directions, but not again, you know, like it was not like we diverged a great deal, but we did.
And to be perfectly honest, Father, I actually appreciate that. I love the diversity of Catholicism in that degree. I love how different rites can still have banter between each other. There's nice friendly banter. We're not essentially turning around and calling each other heretics and schismatics and so forth, but just this nice friendly banter between each other and just this healthy disagreement, because I truly do believe we just build off each other. There have been times, and you know, for example, there have been plenty of times where someone like St. Thomas Aquinas has helped me out, but there's been other times as well where Blessed John Duns Scotus fills in a few gaps that not necessarily Aquinas would have filled there. So there's no issues with it at the end of the day. At least that's what I believe.
And you know, there were Dominicans in the 14th century who were not Thomas.
Absolutely.
And there were also Dominicans in the 14th and 15th century who were students of Scotus. So it's medieval philosophy is much richer and much more varied.
Absolutely.
Than we often can think.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Sorry to kind of take it off track with the Rosary.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Look, Father, there has been multiple stories that I've heard about how the Rosary got its name. Before I give my little insight, which you probably will have the same one, could you give us a little insight on where the Rosary actually got its name? Because before it was called the Rosary, for those watching, it was actually called the Marian Psalter for centuries.
So it's called the Marian Psalter, yes. It's when does it get called the Rosary specifically? Actually, I'd have to look that up.
Love it. Although you've trumped him. What have you done, mate?
I didn't mean to.
Tell me what you've got, and I'll tell you what I've got.
Yeah. So from what I've got, there's two little things, and they actually come from the Franciscans. So around the 15th century, both of them, a Franciscan novice actually had a vision of himself crowning Our Lady with the Rosary, and that's where with roses, sorry,
With
and
roses,
that's where the Rosary comes from. And in saying that, and I'm not sure if it's the same Franciscan who I'm talking about, because I read them two different places. And a Franciscan a friar used to have pray the Rosary before he had dinner. And one time he came that he forgot to pray the Rosary, or he didn't have enough time to pray the Rosary. So he got excused by his superior. He goes, "Can I please go pray the Rosary?" Went to pray it, and he was taking a while. And his superior sent two monks to go check on him and to see where he's going. And then they didn't come back. And then he sent another two. And they also didn't come back. And they came back with the story where the person who was praying it, each Our Father, a white rose came out of his mouth. And each Hail Mary, a red rose came out of his mouth. And there was two angels and Mother Mary standing in front of him. And the angels were picking it up and crowning Our Lady with it. And for those who want to read it, I can't remember where it is in this book, but it's in the Secrets of the Rosary by St. Louis de Montfort, who's also, correct me if I'm wrong, Father, but he's a Dominican?
Yeah, so he was a Dominican tertiary, I think.
Yeah.
So priest. So that's that's one version that the Rosary is related to this vision of Our Lady taking roses out of the mouth. It could just be that, much like Corona, you mentioned Corona. Rosary actually means Rosarium. It means a collection of roses, a garland. So just looking at this idea of a chain, a necklace, that could just be another way of saying crown.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I can't remember who said this. They said if a rose is the crown of all flowers, that means the Rosary is the crown of all devotion. So I think it might have been St. Louis de Montfort, but I can be wrong and way off.
And look, fundamentally, at the end of the day, they're all fantastic stories. They really are. I just love how you said towards the end, Father, was like, I don't know, whatever. Like, just
I genuinely don't know. There used to be the case what in England, people used to leave money for what were called beadsmen. And beadsmen were based on the idea that you gave money to feed a certain number of poor people, and they in turn would say that they're beads for you, the beads of the Rosary. So, yeah.
There you go. Father, if you don't mind, I want to ask a question just in terms of the, let's just call it the practical spirituality of the Rosary. Because I recall a story when we were on a retreat once, and one of the boys asked the priest who was with us, when you're praying the Rosary, what are you meant to focus on? Is it the prayer or is it the mystery?
Mystery.
Which one do you go with? And I remember they came back because Father asked them to go think about it, pray about it, contemplate it. And they came back, and when Father asked them, they said, well, we think it's both, but we just don't know how you're meant to go about it. So I just wanted to ask you, is there any practical advice that you give to people who are praying the Rosary? Is there a particular style that you take on?
I have a number of things. There's almost every. So when I preach on the Feast of the Holy Rosary, I usually preach about, the Rosary as prayer and how you're supposed to go about it and so on.
Beautiful.
It's basic. This is true of all prayer. Prayer is a conversation with God. When you're having a conversation with somebody, what you're saying to them is important.
Absolutely.
But basically, you're trying to communicate to them. And sometimes, and the relationship that exists between you is actually much more important than what you're saying, what you're explicitly saying anyway. And it contributes to it in some way. So you're focusing on God. And everything else exists for the sake of that. The prayers, the things that you are meditating on, and so on. And remember that you are asking Our Lady to pray for you. That's an admission of, that's an admission of the superiority of her prayer to ours. And it's a very important admission.
Wow.
Because a lot of people feel bad because their mind wanders when they pray the Rosary. I should say our, because my mind wanders when I pray the Rosary.
Absolutely.
And I think that's part of the point of it. And because for me, at least, the Rosary is God working with my weaknesses.
Wow.
And coming to our aid when we struggle. And so, I mean, your mind wanders, that's all right. If you lose count and you say 5 decades instead of 10, if you say 5 Hail Marys instead of 10, because you have a really wandering mind, which some of us do, that's all right, because it's not a mathematical equation. It's to be solved. It's a conversation that you're having, and provided that conversation is healthy and helping you, the details of it are actually less important.
Wow.
than the fact that you're actually having the conversation.
That's amazing.
I think Saint Louis de Montfort said that it's actually really hard to pray the perfect Rosary, and I think he even used the word impossible. And Saint Therese of Lisieux actually struggled to pray the Rosary because of its aspects of it, and it's not only its aspects but its beauty. There's so much things you want to focus on. Some people even want to focus on the intention that they're praying about. But in kind of asking you to elaborate on the point, Father, I feel that, and this is a pet peeve of mine, when I hear someone praying the Rosary rushingly or not focusing on when they're praying. Well, what are your advice in terms of how we're meant to say, let's say, like Hail Mary, the Glory Be, or the Our Father?
I must confess, I don't like praying the Rosary with other people.
Okay.
Because inevitably, I find that their way of praying the Rosary is not my way of praying the Rosary.
Absolutely.
It drives me up the wall when people are faster than me and when people are slower than me. Again, I'd be extremely, kind of, because again, it's a devotion, which means that it's something that you are personally doing. So, yeah, I would say focus on God. Make sure you're not, it's, I mean, how shall I say this? I mean, I suppose for some people, you might just need to, have a structure that you say a certain amount of, you say 5 decades every day or whatever it is, and they might find it useful to rush through, if provided it's not, you don't think that you are giving something to God by this rather than God giving something to you.
Correct.
It's always important to keep grace in mind with prayer. That that it's really happening on God's terms.
Yeah.
And you don't let's put it this way. You don't get more grace by saying 10 decades fast as opposed to 5 decades slowly. But I would say whatever works for you. It's not the liturgy. It's a private devotion. So yeah, whatever works for you.
Can I just say that is so, and Alters, maybe we can go back and forth with this, because I know this is a point that you and I discussed quite a bit. But can I just say, Father, the way that you just summed that up, the whole idea of it's a conversation, and the way that I'm almost thinking about it in my head is, there have been times where I speak very quickly. It's not to implicate that I'm not focusing as much. I'm just talking very quickly. That's the thing, right? So my intentions are still there. Yeah, and it happens at times, right? And I'm just thinking, maybe sometimes when we're almost critiquing other people's prayers, we're focusing so much on these external aspects that we're not really asking, well, what's the internal? How devoted are they? What is their intentions behind it? What is their actual devotion behind it? And all of that has just come to my head simply by you saying prayer is a conversation.
It matters about the intention as well. Like Stefan said, I'm a very fast speaker as well, but it does matter about intention and how they're doing it. Because in our head we might think, oh, they're just rushing it to finish it, but it might just be the way they speak. Did you want to add anything to that, Stefan? Because there's 2 more topics that I want to cover.
No worries, but you go for it. You go for it. I'm wary of time, and I want to be able to cover everything.
Yeah, say that. That's why I want to go. Father, the first topic I want to cover before we end one of the 2 topics, the luminous mysteries.
Okay.
We know some traditional Catholics, and I know one of my family members is watching who might have a differing opinion on it. The luminous mysteries, are they important? Should we pray them? Where do they come from?
We're going to get in trouble.
Why are they important?
I mean, again, if it works for you, do. If it doesn't, don't.
Father, you're so simple. I love that. It's just so straight. It's amazing.
I mean, the Rosary is a private devotion. Private devotions are shaped by people's personal relationship, what they do to it, and so on and so forth. The practice of making up mysteries is not new. It's it's old, and people make up mysteries on the basis of what they would really like to think about and find, find wonderful about Christ, about the Blessed Virgin Mary, about even St. John the Baptist. So if you have a particular, if in some way the beheading of John the Baptist speaks to you, then meditate on it. So
I love it.
the thing about, so the luminous mysteries are one of several suggestions made by Pope St. John Paul II in his, encyclical on the Rosary, the Rosarium Virginis Mariae. It's the one which took off.
Yeah.
He made several other suggestions, which actually, I kind of like. I do pray the Luminous Mysteries. I pray it on a different day. I do slightly different things with all of this. But for instance, he suggested that some people in certain places in Europe, they actually add the mystery to the middle of the Rosary. So, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus, who was born in the stable in Bethlehem.
Yes, I've heard of this before. Yes.
So there are people who do that. There are people who read the scriptures before every decade. And so again, this was one suggestion that was made.
Father, I do have to disagree with you that Saint John Paul II introduced them. I actually read somewhere, I think it was in Father Donatello's book, it wasn't Saint John Paul II. I think he didn't. I wouldn't say he stole it, but he got it from Saint George of Praga in Malta. So he basically said, look, these are different types of mysteries that you can reflect upon during the Rosary. And he didn't say you have to do it. He just said these are different types of mysteries. And funnily enough, as reading the Secrets of the Rosary, St. Louis de Montfort talks about 4 of the 5 luminous mysteries as a different means to pray the Rosary of what you can reflect upon, which is beautiful.
I don't think... I didn't intend to say that John Paul II invented it, but he didn't invent the practice of saying.
Okay.
Yes, he promoted it.
Correct.
So, it's true. It's quite a traditional thing to say different mysteries, and these mysteries were around, and he proposed them.
Yeah.
And really, it was in some ways the Rosary had been downgraded in some ways after the Second Vatican Council, not by the popes, but simply in the way in which people often spoke about the Rosary.
Yeah.
It was associated with a it was seen by a lot of people as just repetition or something like that. And so John Paul II was really trying to revive and point out the genuine resources within it. So all of these things are different ways of saying, look, you find the rosary repetitive. Maybe if you did this, or if you tried that, you wouldn't. You can revive your connection with the rosary. So that was the reason why he said that.
And one can't help but see the fruits of the luminous mystery. Like, for example, the first luminous mystery, I remember me and Stefan were speaking to one of our brothers and sisters of the Protestant faith, and they didn't care about baptism. They said, you don't need baptism. And then we've got, like the second luminous mystery, where we have the marriage being affected right now. Like, there are battles that are present in our everyday and age. And then even the fifth luminous mystery, how many Catholics do not believe in the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist? So it's kind of, as I'm referring to Father Donald Calloway, and I love him. He preaches the message of the Rosary so well. But Father Donald Calloway, he said, it's not like getting rid of the old spiritual sword, but we're resharpening it for the new battles that we're facing.
Yeah. Yes, and I often find it works in all sorts of different ways depending on who you are. So for me, the baptism of Jesus is about the humility of Christ. For me, a lot of the luminous mysteries are about how Christ defers to other people.
Yes.
So Christ, people point to Christ, Christ points to others. And yeah, there are many things, and each of us
most definitely
draws something different from it, and
most definitely,
100%.
I remember in last year I had to actually quarantine for 14 days with a wide range of people from my parish, and we actually reflected on 5 mysteries that were for healing, because a lot of the people who had to quarantine had the virus, and thankfully I didn't. But we prayed together and reflected upon mysteries of healing, and to help with the other people who were in quarantine to get better, to overcome this virus.
Can I just say, sorry, Altez, I'm sorry to cut in. I just want to thank Father again for once again his simple explanation when it comes to the luminous mysteries, and that is, and Father, if I can just sum it up in one sentence, if you don't want to pray the luminous mysteries, just don't pray them. Just don't tell anybody else not to pray them.
I mean, it's I think in general, we need to realize that the object of the reason why we are praying the Rosary is actually to talk to God.
Absolutely.
And different people talk differently.
Yes. That's it.
And that's right. Don't narrow down to and it's something which Augustine is particularly good on. To allow for all these differences. There's a wonderful letter that he writes to somebody who asks him a question which might be amusing to us. That is, whether we should have a bath before Holy Thursday.
Amazing.
In the early church, baths were regarded as luxuries, so
yes.
you gave up having a bath for Lent. And the question was whether you should have a bath before Holy Thursday. And he said, well, look, apparently the baptisms happen on Holy Thursday, and or part of the preparation happened on the Holy Thursday. I can't remember which one. And he said, well, you should, so that you don't soil the font. It's very practical.
Yeah.
And He does the same thing elsewhere. He speaks of receiving the Eucharist. He says, "Look, in the West, we receive the Eucharist we can receive the Eucharist every day because they had Mass every day. But in the East, if you go to the East, they only had Mass on Sunday. They only celebrated Divine Liturgy on Sunday, and like you do whatever's common in your place, in your local area. So, yeah.
It's simple practicality. It's amazing.
Yeah. Most definitely.
I'll just go on, brother, because we're
last thing, and it's a big topic, but let's try and narrow it down as much as we can, because we can go both ways. And that's mainly because I've been asked this a lot. Why does the devil hate the Rosary?
I can see what you mean by it can be big or small topic, bro. I can see that. Yep.
Well, I mean, anything that brings you closer to God is hated by the devil. Absolutely. So, I mean, the devil is defined by hatred of God and hatred of people drawing closer to God.
Yeah.
And so, the devil hates vocations. The devil hates good friendships, So, I mean, because the Rosary brings you closer to God. So I'll give a short answer.
I can't help but think about Father Gabriel Amorth, who was an exorcist, who once in an exorcism heard the devil saying, if Catholics knew the power of the Rosary, I'll have no power, and each Ave was like a blow to his head. That's something I usually go after, or I give them the 10th rose of the Secrets of the Rosary, where Saint Dominic, Saint Louis de Montfort writes, Saint Dominic during an exorcism prayed the Rosary, and after each Hail Mary, 1,000 or 100 demons left this individual, and they actually came out as burning red hot coals. So if anyone does want to read that part, I think The Secrets of the Rosary is a free online book. If you just type in Secrets of the Rosary PDF and go to the 10th Rose, you can actually read that story. I love the Rosary, and it's also the fact that it's a Marian devotion, and we got the 4 dogmas of Mary, and then you can relate it back to Genesis 3:15, where God says, "I'll put an enmity between you and the woman and her offspring."
Amazing.
Yeah.
Love your simple explanation once again, Father. Just he's going to hate it because it brings you closer to God, bro, and that's not what he wants.
Yeah. And like it's the same with the scriptures, or all other kind of devotions, that the purpose of them is to bring you closer to God, to bring you into a conversation with God, and that's what ultimately purifies us. God reaching out to us, and our being able to kind of accept Him working in us.
Yeah.
Sorry, Stefan. I have one more question for Father, and it's literally going to be a yes or no answer.
Okay.
I remember having a friend of mine who had a rosary, and unfortunately the cross fell off. And I told him, "Oh, just get a new rosary." He goes, "Oh no, I'll keep praying with that." I'm like, "Oh, but it's kind of an incomplete rosary." Is it an incomplete rosary without the crucifix?
What? I already know what Father's answer is going to be. No.
No. I mean, it obviously, like a crucifix is helpful.
Yeah.
It's helpful for you. It is itself a sacramental if it's blessed. But No, I mean, you can wear a rosary ring and pray on that,
Yeah.
which I used to do. And not all rosary rings have a cross in the center.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, no, it's not incomplete.
Beautiful. No, I do agree, but it's my OCD who wants that prefers the whole thing. But yeah, I know what you mean, Father. I definitely agree with it.
Alrighty, I'm gonna end it. Sorry, Father.
Sure.
Were you gonna add something?
No, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to end on a bit of a light note. I wanted to know, have you ever had a bit of a back and forth or any banter with any Maronites?
Lots. Over time, I've known many Maronites, and we've had lots of different kinds of them. Yes.
Thank God.
I think I'm gonna have to bring you. We're gonna have to bring you on one time, Father, just to have a bit of back and forth. Maybe we'll bring a Maronite priest on, and you two can kind of have a chat about that. But yeah, unfortunately, with that, we are out of time. Father Robert Krishna, we really do appreciate it, and it's been really rewarding for the both of us. It's been incredibly fruitful, and I've just learned the art of simplicity when it comes to simple answers. And brothers and sisters, thank you all very much for joining us. For those of you that joined us on Facebook, obviously like our page and like the video and share it around. On YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. And yeah, just try and spread the word as much as you can, because our main aim is to try and evangelize through the social media platforms.
Don't forget the bell notifications, guys.
Thank you all to us. Father Robert Krishna, can I trouble you with a prayer for everybody who's joined us?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Saint Dominic,
pray for us.
Our Lady of the Rosary, pray for us.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Father. Thank you again, brothers and sisters.
Father.
Allah Malcolm.
Okay, see you.
God bless you, Father.
I'll head off. Okay, bye. Okay.